In life, we must believe that things end, things end at the right time. Things end, things end in due time. This time, it will be my time, yeah. In due time, in my time. I'm so glad that it's my time.
If truth be told, I foresee this episode being a lot shorter than the last. But you know what? It's okay because as long as what needs to be communicated is put out there and it is shared, I think that is the most important part. But anyway, what is up, you guys? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the BIYG podcast, Believe in Your Growth. I am your host, Stefan Simmons, and I'm not going to do too much chattering. We just going to jump into it because even before I got on, I try not to do a lot of planning. I want my stuff to be authentic, but at the same time, I know that that's not going to be every case where it's just spontaneity or however you say the word, but it's going to be structured and things like that. But sometimes it's okay to just be yourself and show up like yourself consistently, authentically, and, just be faithful, right? To whatever the purpose and plan is that has been given to your heart. So anyway, last episode I talked about death, and I think that is so important in surrendering and living a good life, understanding death from the natural perspective and from the spiritual perspective. And I really, again, bringing up the not planning because I had an idea of where I wanted to go when I first started this series, and it started because of me hearing someone talk about what the Bible was really about and what Jesus's life was really about. They made it about discipline, but Jesus' whole purpose was love. And really, when you look at the reason he loved, it was because of his surrender to the purpose for his life. It's surrendering to the will of God. And, I think that's very important. Um, the first episode I did in this series was love, lastly, death. And now we're going to talk about control. I want to start. So, because if any of those that have watched the last episode regarding this series, I've been kind of on and off. It's toward the end of that, how do you say, emotional roller coaster. I think about it, but I'm not crying. And there may be a little tear or a little heart wrenching moment, but I think last week I cried a lot. Now it is sinking in, but it's not the sinking in where hope is lost. It's the sinking in where I have to do something, and I mean to what is in my control, time and attention and you know all of the stuff that I can do with what God has allowed, what is present, what is available, the resources that are with me, right? But even, just to get to my point and what I was trying to bring up because it was literally before I hit record, it came to my mind. I was so down a little bit and I do believe God saw, you know, it really God cares for his people. I don't care. God cares for his creation. I don't care what they're going through. God cares, you know. And in the whole process of the up and down, the grieving that I'm facing death and it's not even it's the what I'm concerned about isn't even happened yet, but I do believe it is a preparation, and I'm facing it and I'm proud of myself for being courageous and deciding to still get up and still go forward knowing what if God willing comes in the next 20, next 40, 50, and then 65 years, And so I was in I just I don't want to give what the instance that happened because my reward God will give it to me. I don't need men to give it to me. But it's just funny how, because I was crying and crying and crying, and in the midst of that crying, I had to say thank you, God, because though it's painful, there is the revelation and the realization that I still have time. You know, there's still something that I can do right now, even if it was 10 minutes. There's still time, and so I just thank God for even the realization of what is in my control. And, you know, either I can squander the next portion of my life, or I can do something with it, do something about it. And, that's not going to stop cuz there will be some pain, but that's the price of love. When you really love, you know, you're going to experience some hurt. And sadly, I mean, that's just what comes with the package of existing. But again, there's a lot of nuance that goes into it, and I can't hit every nail on the head in any conversation, but really with every emotion and every thought and every moment that is happening in my life, and even regarding topics, I can't, touch every little thing, but I just pray that people understand what I'm speaking. You know, just because I said this doesn't mean that I disagree with that, or I don't understand that, or recognize that, or whatever, right? But point being, um I can definitely testify that God sees and God hears. And you know your work is not in vain. I think a lot of times it makes us question, what are we doing? Is it enough? Um, the standards, whose standard am I going by? But then you sit back and you release the control and needing to know all of those answers, and God just speaks anyway, and God just reveals anyway, because it's like I think uh, life was never meant to be a bore. It was never meant to be this pain and this burden and this suffering. That's where death came in. Death incited what brought all of that. That's the package deal, that came with sin, which i.e. synonymous to death, right? But I think about, like, even with Job, God was blessing Job. It was the adversary, Satan, that came with problem, death, right? Job is in the world, tried not to be of the world, and I think I successfully, walked it out. But just because you choose to do good, you do everything in your control, in your power, to live pleasing, holy, acceptable, or even just simply be a good person, kind, um, loving and caring and compassionate. That does not negate the fact that life and chance happens to us all. And you cannot, there's a lot of things in life you will not be able to control, but your actions, your level of gratitude, for those of us that believe the Bible says, well, it insinuates and it suggests for us to be grateful in all things. Now, I say suggest, but I believe it to be more of a command, one of those helpful things, like, please take this and realize it is for your benefit, that you be grateful in all things. You know what I'm saying? Because I just, it would be so much more stressful, you know, and I guess I don't know how to really explain that. And that's my human side. I don't have to know everything, but I also don't want to control everything. I'm not God. I don't need that position. I don't need that posture in my life, you know, to be Lord over this and that and this and that. Yes, what God gives me to steward over, that's within my control. That's within, and, even if I think that I'm not capable or I don't have the capacity, if God gave it to me, then I can do it, you know? And so, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that I'm grateful that God doesn't allow those hard moments to just kind of like consume us. And I mean, it's a one day, one step at a time kind of thing. I wish I could tell y'all what happened. That way there would be a level of encouragement, but you know, the Bible does talk about what is it when it says you basically sharing your good deeds, that will be your reward, the applause of men, but I believe that God has a greater reward set aside and released and you know for me. And so all I can say is give you the essence of what happened is God cares. God cares. And sometimes it's gonna be in the smallest way, But you got to be so connected to the love and to the grace and to the ways that when it happens, it makes sense. You can see it, you can feel it, you receive it, you know? Um, anyway, I don't really know where we're gonna go with this because the whole thing about even, I mean, in and outside of spirituality, people are looking for a sense of control, you know, um, because they realize they have none. I mean, I think going back to the whole death situation, we don't control how long we live, you know, we don't control that. Some people are working toward that, and God bless them. Um, but there's just certain things that are not we're not supposed to have the reins on. You know, um, I value my mortality. I value the fact that I am a human being. That I have brothers and sisters, and I'm talking about neighbors. People in the world. There's 8 billion people on the planet. I can relate to, and I'm glad about it. We're made in the image of God, but we're not God, and I'm glad about it. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful. That's in my control. I'm very thankful. Looking over my life, I just I think I've shared this before in regular podcast episodes, but the need to mend my own broken heart because of my upbringing or experiences with certain people, you know, my story may not look like someone else's, but it has its own essence, its own sting, its own victories. Every individual story matters. We shouldn't look at people and be like, "Oh, they had it worse." I mean, yeah, we can look at things in what is it, respect, but that still doesn't negate the fact that let's say that person, that very person who went through what you're going through with your capacity, maybe not your capacity, but you could have went through something 10 times less horrendous than them, but what you went through killed them. You get what I'm saying? But I don't know. That's why we all individually have a journey, and we should respect each other. That's off topic, but we should. And again, we do know that there are some things that are worse than others. It could be worse. I mean, we can look at every person that is living and say it could be worse. Look at the grave. Look at those who are no longer with us, dead and gone, I mean, young, you know, or I mean, but and that still again, that does not erase pain that we as the living experience, but it could be ended. The finality of that's where it could be, you know. But I just I'm grateful, that I still have time, and again, along with what I recognized and even more so, I said something in one of my Patreon posts, and as I was kind of expressing my thoughts to God, I didn't I guess I love um I love Ecclesiastes, and I'm aware of death and a lot of other things. I'm aware of it, and I think no matter how exposed you are to information, that does not give you an experience. And I know if you can avoid having to go through something, do that. But it doesn't shift you like you being in the position yourself, you know? And honestly, like I said in the Patreon post, I still feel unprepared, even though Ecclesiastes is one of my, I mean, it's my favorite book. It's one of my favorites, but I think Ecclesiastes is my favorite. I like Proverbs, I like Ecclesiastes, and I like Job. I'm a reality kind of person. I'm a reality kind of person, and I think those three books they tell you, they show you how to love God, how to honor God, how to chase God in the midst of trouble, when things are good, when things are bad, Um what I mean, I like how you should live your life. You know, maybe what you should be pursuing in this life, right? Life is supposed to be fun, but don't get crazy, don't get reckless. There's a lot of good meat, within, to me, those three books that I think after a person gets saved and you tell them about Jesus and grace and salvation, I personally, I've said this to someone, I would point them straight to those three books because I want people to know how to suffer, if suffering comes, how to suffer well, how to endure, how to I mean, basically long suffering is one of the fruits of the spirit. To not be blindsided by the fact that it's going to come. It's going to feel different when it gets here, but understand that it's coming, you know? And I'm grateful again to be able to have this time. And, I begin, and I know somewhere in the Bible it does talk about much studying has made you mad. And I think about that from the perspective of being so, I mean, this is going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but being a thinker, being philosophical, having depth, without trying, you think about it and it's like, wow, this is really, I wouldn't say a curse, but this the dramatic effect behind that, you know what I'm saying? Because you realize your mind doesn't work like some people, you know. I'm not gonna say other or all, but no, I mean other is okay, but your mind just doesn't work like some people's. You're not able to just turn it off and, I guess, be blind to certain things. But that's sadly the price you pay for sin, wanting to know more, right? Being I guess the what is it? The tree of knowledge, the tree of good, knowing good and evil, right? That's the price. It comes, I don't know, and I don't know. But I know that with that, there comes a position and there comes a responsibility, you know, the decision to either wallow and to lose my mind or surrender my mind and get up, you know. And I think, I know for a fact, like, I can only do what I do because of God. And that's just me personally. I can only do what I do because of Jesus, the blood of Jesus that protects me, that works for my behalf, on my behalf, right? And I just, I don't know. I try not to worry about how people perceive me, because of something I can't control. Yes, I could try, but I've seen it in life where you go and do something and you're gonna end up right back in the same spot because it's in you. There's a individuality that God has given every single human being. Right now, there's nothing that is uncommon to man, but individuality is so important because everybody has a purpose. And when God designed you, there was a piece of himself, I believe truly, that he wanted to be expressed in the earth. Now, you may be, I don't know, just any random attribute of God, and you and 100,000 other people have that attribute, but y'all is spread all across the globe in order to represent that facet, to display and share with the world that piece of goodness that is our God, our creator, right? And, you know, being me is in my control. I get to decide to be myself or not. I could forsake my blueprint, the blueprint that God has for me. I could forsake that. I could look for someone else's idea and someone else's 5-step strategy and plan. I don't want that. I've never wanted that. It's always been, you know, I think even in control, knowing that, because this may get off topic a little bit, but I've really been understanding, hmm, how do I say it? My intentions are pure, but I need to understand risk and reward, right? Where was I using this illustration or this example? Because let's say I know that I want to sing. I've been a lot last year. I was telling God I don't know what I want, and I was being honest with God. But I love that because it was like God stripped everything down to build it back up, because people already have this preconceived notion of I want this, I want that. But I choose to honestly believe that a lot of people, they don't necessarily, that's not their true heart's desire. That's not what's burning within them. They have seen other people and they began to desire, and I'll call it what it is. It's envy and it's covetous. They want what they've seen because they haven't given it to God. They haven't cleaned the slate, right? For God to be able to do something and build them into what they're supposed to be. And everybody doesn't have to go through that. There's some people who get it off rip, but I've always made that important to me. I don't want someone else's blueprint. I don't want to do it somebody else's way. And it's not about, and I know people used to say, what is it? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. But what if God has that for somebody? You get what I'm saying? There was a great analogy, and a woman, she was in a store and she was talking about, what if we said, or what if people said, well, there's already enough chips. You look at all of the chips, you go down a snack aisle, and you'll see so many different variations of the same flavor. You got ruffled, you got plain, you got straws, you got popcorn. Well, that's not the chip, but they put flavors on the popcorn too. Then you got the same ruffle. Well, you got ruffle, but in different brands, with minor variations of flavoring. But most of them, let's say if you got sour cream and ranch, right? You'll have another sour cream and I don't know, tangy ranch. Or you get what I'm saying? And that's a different brand, or even the same brand. But that right there, like, people are I can't say why those businesses do what they do, and I can't really say why anyone does what they do. I can only speak from my intuition, what I believe is transpiring and occurring. But that's out of my control. I don't spend so much time focusing on that, because that'll tie me up. It'll bind me up when I have much more to do. I have a lot to do. Why do I care about what you've done? I want you to be successful. You come from God just as I've come from the Lord. Why do I care? I don't. I don't. I have a story that I want to tell, but it's not my story to tell. But, we can be so quick to discourage each other and not realize it. But that same analogy, and I mean, seeing it physically, how many different types of chips, same brand, same flavor, different flavor, right? Different shape, different size. And I mean, people didn't stop making chips just because, oh, well, there's a place that already has chips. Okay, and And so that, I don't know, I find it important not to forsake the blueprint that God is giving you. Um because that is one way you do lose control of your life. You lose control, and in that sense, God doesn't want anyone to surrender control of their life like that. If you give over control, you say, God, in this perspective, in this manner, God, whatever you allow to happen, you allow to happen. I.e., I'll give you examples. I make songs, I sing. I'm now doing a podcast, and I'm trying to be. It's in my heart's desire now to be consistent. Where I guess before it felt like, let me do it to try to save myself. That right there, that level of control, you're trying to save yourself rather than just simply trusting God, trusting that God loves you, trusting that if you die to yourself, God will be your protector. You know, let that control go that you need to do something in order to X, Y, and Z. Now, granted, I will say this. Proverbs says that slack can brings about poverty. So you do have to understand that. You do have to understand that. And there's a lot of nuances, but the funny thing and the beautiful thing about it for me, the Bible never contradicts itself, you know. But that is why I'm kind of having these contrasting conversations within a topic, because it's like you have control, but then you also need to surrender it. Surrender your control. And again, I'm not going to go into every little area and thing like that. Like, let's say you cannot control when you die, but you can control what you do between today and then, right? Again, if it's in the next 10 minutes, I mean, I'm not saying worry yourself and stress yourself out, but you could send someone, I love you. You could, I don't know, write a poem. You could go outside. It just snowed on the East Coast, North Carolina. You could go outside and play in the snow and admire what God has done, right? What is in your control, you know, while yet simultaneously not trying to be the Lord of your life, not having to know every little detail about what's going to happen then. And if I do this in the next 6 months, is this going to transpire? How can I get this to happen? Just go, just be, you're a human being, be what God has created you to be. And don't worry about everything else. It'll figure itself out. It will figure itself out. It's already, I mean, it's already written, I believe, you know. But I just it's it's one of those things where, again, I write music, I've done this podcast, and you have to trust that when God allows something to happen, he's allowing it to happen for a reason. I mean, sometimes we look at the bad thing and we don't necessarily understand that that bad thing might be protecting, you know. Um and it may be lawful, but it might not be helpful, right? The thing that we consider bad, because I'll say this, some of us, and I've talked about this before, we want to be consistent, but you don't know, sometimes if God doesn't perfect or renew, restore, rebuild um your mindset. I'll use for example, you can stumble into witchcraft by accident. And because you're consistent, because it's in you that, oh, when I pick something up, I got to keep doing it. I got to keep doing it. Now that thing gains a stronghold in your life. It could have slipped in through a book, through a thought, through a relationship, right? And because you want to be consistent or whatever the thing might be, right? Because we don't understand that you want to be faithful. You want to be faithful, right? God is a consistent God. God is, I think, proud of a diligent worker, but you also have to understand seasons change and your time period is not necessarily God's what God works with. And so I guess again, going back to it, you could easily fall into something that just God knows isn't good for you. So let's say God lets you what looks like struggle with consistency because he's trying to build the foundation of your life, which starts with your spirit, which starts with your relationship with him, which starts with building you up in righteousness and teaching and putting the word, writing the word on your heart. So that way, everything can be tested, every spirit can be tested against that. The laws, the ordinance, the ways of God that was written and established before the systems that we operate within the world. And I mean, granted, I do believe consistency is a heavenly thing as well. Don't get me wrong, but it should be self governance, self control, which is a fruit of the spirit. People call it consistency and discipline, but it should be self control. Because even that sounds to me, and this just could be spiritual language, but it sounds to me more faithful to be self controlled, because you're not going to let, oh, I don't feel like it, get in the way, but you're also not going to let, well, if I don't do this, then I'm going to lose my routine. That's I wouldn't say that's a spirit of fear, but when something has a grip on you like that, you're going to lose momentum, you're going to lose X, Y, and Z. That's not God. You're afraid? What are you afraid? Why are you afraid? That if you miss 1 or 2 days because God has shifted a season, or because of existence, there is a new season that has appeared, and God is giving you the opportunity to steward that season well, because really that's just our life, stewarding the things that God has blessed us with. But yet, and this again, another story that's not mine to tell, but I heard, but I kind of watched someone do that. They had a relative that needed them, but because their schedule was so important, they kind of just, I don't know, threw the trust of their family out the window. It was like, my routine is much more important, because if I don't do it, I'm gonna forget it. I mean, I watched this but I heard about it, and I that's why, to me, I don't want to be consistent. I want to be faithful. I want to have self control and diligence. I can't go through all the fruits of the spirit, because when I'm talking, I talk prayerfully to, yes, reach people, but I talk from what is in my heart and what needs to be expressed at the time. I don't prescribe, or I don't exclaim myself to be a teacher. I am a friend. I am a human being expressing and sharing my humanity with others. But don't be like that. Don't be so fearful and so need to control everything regarding your life that you forsake a moment God is giving you, because you never know what could happen. I'd hate to simply just jump to that could be your last time with X, Y, and Z, or a certain, I'd hate to jump to that, because it's not always going to be that. But you ought to live your life like this is the last day, the last hour, the last second, and that's why I believe God wants to give us the opportunity to build lives where we can actually have what he intended. I believe it, and if we stop wavering between two opinions because we need control, but we also have insecurity and all of this other stuff, if we stop wavering, we can actually tap into it, but I mean, I kind of feel myself needing to wrap up now. But yeah, I mean, there's the things God is over. God is over everything, but you get what I'm saying. I use, I'm glad again God brought me into the garden, because I understand this. My responsibility, I just started some seed trays. My responsibility is preparing the soil, you know, watering or soaking the seeds, doing whatever is necessary to prepare that, prep it, get ready. You know, I can start on time and because of advancements of technology or even, whatever, right? I can start early, I can start on time. I don't want to start late, let's be honest. But whatever the decision I make, the price, the reward, the repercussions are is mine. But nevertheless, that doesn't stop the need to relinquish control after I've done what I've done. There will be accountability. Again, if you want to be the person who waits or who goes before God says it's the moment to, you have to take responsibility for your faith or your lack thereof. You have to. Nobody in this world, especially even if you're a child of God, you have to take responsibility for the fact of, well, I believe God said this. And, at the end of the day, that's another area. But at the end of the day, yeah, well, let's just go back. Let's mosey back to the seeds. You plant them, you wait, but you wait, you serve that plant, you serve that idea, you serve that video, you serve it, you give it the necessary nutrients and the care and tending that it desires and it needs in order to thrive. A music career, you don't drop one song and then 10 years later be like, okay, where my music career at? Well, you didn't necessarily tend to it. You may have done certain things, but you didn't do almost everything possible, right? Like, I've sung and I've sung and I've sung. I've done a lot of practicing behind closed doors, which is very powerful because what you do in private, God will exalt publicly. And I've seen that, I thank God for that. But now it's getting to the point where God is like, the whole experience that I had in the garden is why it's so important. Once you plant the seed, you got to do every little thing. It is there was a post that I made last year, but it does require all that. It requires that and some. Don't let nobody ever tell you, oh, all that ain't necessary. Yes, it is. It is necessary. It's the difference between someone who is successful and someone who is considered slack-handed. You know, someone who is diligent and comparable to an ant versus someone who is like a sluggard. And so, you know, realizing that I cannot control the wind when I plant my seeds and when they start growing. Now granted, again, technology and advancements, there's shelters that can be built, there's caves and tunnels and little tarps that you can do. There's a lot that we can do today, and so even that is in your control, but you still can't control the wind, you can't control tornadoes, you can't control the pests that get in the ground, nematodes, the bad ones. There's just certain things you cannot control. But that's what you surrender to God. And I ain't said nothing about prayer this whole time, but pray. 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 You know? I mean, uh, partner with God. That's your partnership. You surrender control in one way by prayer, continually acknowledging and submitting your requests before the Lord. That's when you realize you can't do it all by yourself. When you need something greater than yourself, you know. But again, I mean, I'm glad that I've had the experiences because now it definitely has prepared me. And even though I can't go back in time, you know, making the most, controlling the days, the hours, the seconds, every moment. And so yeah, I'm gonna end here because I'm just rambling at this point. But again, these episodes in this series, they're supposed to be me pouring out rather than me trying to teach or me trying to be I don't know, an authority. The Bible is the greatest authority. God will be the greatest teacher of all, the greatest artist, the greatest everything, you know. But I'm just another human being, and I'm glad that again God just really showed me that what I'm doing, it matters. It's powerful. And, I'm going to be okay. And so I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for every life, every ear that will hear, that will come into contact with me, with a video, with a poem, with a song, with a idea, with a dream, with a whisper about me, a conversation regarding me, with a prompting or a suggestion of, I know this person who does this. I'm thankful for your life. I'm thankful for you. And I'm grateful, that you will understand this concept of what's in my control, I can give my attention to. What is not, it is not my business to worry about. Again, that's gonna take some experience and some studying if you are, want to look into things to understand what can I help and what can I not, you know? But I'm glad that I can be here to share that because there's somebody who's thinking, and they're overthinking and they're overcomplicating it and they don't know how to separate, what's theirs and what's not, what's God's and what's theirs, what's somebody else's and what's theirs. You got to realize what is your responsibility? What is your purpose? You know, what is your heart's desire? What is the fire that is shut up within your bones? You know. And so let me just stop because I'm gonna keep going. Anyway, remember to stay positive. Keep that with you, spread it wherever you go. My name is Stefan Simmons, if you didn't know. With all that being said, love yourselves and love others. Yeah. Have a good one.